it's difficult for the sales managers to get adoption on some of the training and keep it, there's this term called stickiness that is often used, but the real trick is trying to get some of the training to stick so that they can actually get the value out of their investment and get the development level up. But for the sales manager, looking at it from their level, if they can't get their entire team to actually use whatever the training is and adopt it in such a fashion that they actually increase their overall effectiveness, then as a sales manager, they're not getting the value out of any of that investment in terms of training. So it's a problem that they constantly grapple with, because on the sales manager level, it's trying to provide training for the salespeople so that they can increase their overall effectiveness. On the salespeople side, they say, gee, this is another training program. Joe's not going to remember this 6 months from now, so I'll go through it and I'll be passive and I won't resist it, but I know he won't ask me the questions or she won't ask me the questions, so they'll forget it soon, and so will I. I've only seen a few companies that have done a good job of it, and it comes from them investing some time and energy and money into two different areas. One, to train the managers on walking the talk, using the methodology, so that there seems to be more resistance for the managers to change than there are for the target audience with the salespeople. So that's one side. The other side is that few companies do this, which is to invest in other training to reinforce some of the original training so that salespeople will realize that it's not going to go away. I think that's an interesting topic, and if you think about some of the salespeople, first of all, that most salespeople, or studies have shown that most salespeople as a group have the highest incidence of whatever that word is. I've already forgotten it. No, it's a learning, it's a attention span. There, see, I'm a perfect example of it. And if you know that salespeople have this as an issue, then when you give them a very heavy or complex methodology or training program, they naturally have a problem with actually understanding it and using it, because their attention span is in and out, and while they're in the training program, they're thinking about, okay, that's an interesting thought. I wonder what I need to go do to close that next piece of business. And for that next 3 minutes or whatever they're thinking, they've lost whatever the instructor has said, or they've lost the point. And that's why most of this training doesn't stick in sales. So I think trying to figure out exactly, well, how do you reach salespeople? How do you actually get them to take some of this stuff on board? And I think, again, research has shown that a lot of salespeople are imitators through life. They learn a lot through imitation. So they're real good at watching people, and I think that they grow up understanding patterns and how people do things, interface with one another. So I think they reach a level of competency in understanding how things change and how patterns develop. So maybe this whole notion about giving them something that's more graphical in the orientation appeals to their natural inclination to look at patterns and to make judgments from that. And it also allows them to quickly and succinctly reach some kind of conclusion, as opposed to reading through a lot of text or reading through a lot of forms where they lose their attention. I think almost all of the methodologies that I can recall all had some kind of a checkbox or some way to kind of cue the salesperson. It was a step in the right direction of a visual cue, right? It was almost an icon. So if you can think about the fox, or you can think about, the red flags or the 1 through 20, they were all meant to take a step in the direction of being a graphical communication to the salesperson. But by the very nature of the technology that was used 20 years ago when those things were first developed, they didn't really have an elegant way to do a dashboard kind of a display. And doing it in color, now this appeals to a salesperson in being able to recognize patterns so that I can quickly understand, oh gee, I've got a vulnerability there because I have an absence of color that I can quickly understand. So what are the actions that I necessarily need to do now to get some information to fill that out and to reduce my vulnerability? Likewise, the sales manager, who again suffers from this deficiency of attention span, can look at this dashboard and say, I can see that, Joe or Sally has a deficiency in their particular opportunity plan. I can see that graphically very quickly. So now I understand what I need to do to coach them so I can help them improve their overall probability of close. They have too much noise coming at them, and it's very difficult to get through that with, okay, I'm going to take them out of their environment for 2 or 3 days and train them. Well, first of all, you can't do that because there's too much action, right? Number one. Number two, you have to say, well, how can I help them get what they need and still exist within this high speed of responsiveness that they have to do with their customers? So I think you have to be very, very flexible in terms of allowing some of the participants to choose how they want to be trained. And we oftentimes talk about the trainable or coachable moment. This is when I know that I've got to make a call tomorrow on the president of my client. Now I'm in a trainable moment trying to say, okay, now exactly how do I put this presentation together to be really effective? So in some cases that may be, they may be perfectly fine to take off 2 days and say, I want to learn about a particular topic and I want to do a real deep dive on it. I really want to understand it, and I want to hear my peers relate to it so that can help my education as well. Or I may want to say, I want to click a different option and I want to take that down in some kind of a distance learning or an e-learning kind of a module so that I can do it maybe, I'm going to be on a plane ride, or maybe I'm going to be on a train, or maybe I'm going to be in a hotel where I can be connected and do it that way. Maybe I want to actually download this and look at it through some kind of, maybe it's my BlackBerry, maybe it's my phone, maybe it's something that I've got some image on that I can actually do it, or maybe I just want to do an audio download and do it through a pod. So I think, the trend is to give the target audience an option in terms of how they would choose to be trained. What I've seen is there are a lot of companies that develop techniques, develop methodologies some 20 years ago that really, they've tried to keep them up to date, but they, the heart and soul of the architecture of those programs really hasn't changed in that period of time. So I think anything that we can start to blend some of the capabilities of the network, blend images with content, actually enhances and makes the training far more fun. And let's face it, a lot of the salespeople that we're training these days are cutting their teeth on video games. So what is their particular preference in terms of the way they entertain themselves, or the way that they interface with things? The images are so vibrant and so flashy, and if we give them pretty solid and one-dimensional PowerPoint slides, it's just not compared in their mind to what their world has become. I see a lot of the training companies probably heading for niche players, frankly, because for 2 reasons. Most of these companies used some of the early companies as their model. So let's go out and hire a subject matter expert in selling and the ability to write some PowerPoint slides, and I'm in a training business. Now, the unfortunate thing is there's still a lot of clients that are happy to buy that because they think that's what their salespeople should be exposed to. But I think that relates back to why we see such low adoption with some of the salespeople, because they're not being entertained. It's not catchy. It doesn't compare to, the video games or their regular world. It's not happening in a coachable or a trainable moment. And it's not as quick as they'd like to take it, or in the format that they choose to use for learning. It's the multiple disciplines that are in the company in terms of their backgrounds, their skills, which first and foremost is that this organization's highly creative. They're highly visual, deep in terms of professional training, PhDs, masters in various disciplines, in terms of learning, in terms of selling, in terms of managing. instructional design. I mean, we've got all of the credentials, but it's a unique blend of the creativity of those people as opposed to just the run-of-the-mill people that have those degrees. So if you add that to a great mixture of cultures, I don't know that there are too many companies, just at a base level that can compete and bring the capabilities to the clients in such a unique way. Not only from a creativity standpoint, but from a global standpoint, from a cultural standpoint.